Well, good afternoon, everybody. So, on the bench today is a Vatrer server rack battery. Now, I haven't looked at any other server rack batteries before. We did several months ago take a look at one of their golf cart batteries. And I've seen lots of videos. They've got several server rack batteries out there. They've got a Walmart battery out there, but this one is newer to the market. And this one has built-in heaters in it. So we're going to take a look and see if the build quality on this server rack battery is as good as what we saw in their golf cart battery. So let's take a look together. So this is a 48 volt server rack battery, 51.2 volts nominal, 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. This has the normal, BMS protections built into it, but in addition to the low temperature protection, it has those built-in heaters that are supposed to kick in when the temperature drops below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And they warm up the cells and then allow for proper charging, because with lithium iron phosphate chemistry, you're not supposed to charge the cells below 32 degrees Fahrenheit because you can damage them. So that this is supposed to have heaters around the cells. They warm up the cells first. Once the cells get up to, I think it's 41 degrees Fahrenheit, then it'll allow charging. If we were closer to winter right now, I'd throw this thing outside, let it freeze up, and then see how the heaters worked. Unfortunately, it's a million degrees outside in the middle of summer, so we'll have to figure out some other ways to test those heaters. But this is rated for 5,000 cycles. It's got the Bluetooth app. It's got details on the display. You'll notice this is their style that does not have built-in inverter communications, which, whether you need it or not, half of my environment's not running off of BMS communication anyways. So you can do it without them. Quick dimensions. We've got about 17.5 inches wide. Depth, including the handles, about 19.5 inches, and our height is about 6 1/8 inch. And like most server rack batteries, it's about 100 pounds, 102 pounds. Taking a look at the front of the battery, we've got fixed handles on both sides. Right here, I believe, is a grounding stud. Positive battery terminal, double connection, 125 amp Shunt circuit breaker. We have our display, which, let's just peel this off right now. Such a nice feeling. Same display, I believe, that we did see on their golf cart battery. We have a double negative bus bar over here, and then that fixed server rack handle on this side. Now, a couple things to note on this. I am not a fan of these style battery terminals. Other people might like them. I don't, for two reasons. One, this is a very tight spacing in here. Trying to get a larger lug in here, you might be able to get, let's see, you can get a 4 gauge in there. You cannot get a 2-aught cable in there. Maybe a 2 gauge cable, maybe, and then it might be spreading out. So that's one reason I don't care for these. The other one is you only have 2 bolts on the side holding this in, and usually they end up wiggling themselves free over time when you're trying to tighten things down. But they do have 2 terminals, so you can put 2 smaller gauge cables on here. I believe these have M8 bolts in them with a washer and lock washer on the end. They do have covers to go over top of the terminals to keep fingers off, which is nice. Now, you can't turn the battery on without turning the breaker on. That's something that I don't necessarily care for. I like to be able to see the information about what's going on with the BMS without these terminals being live. But we can turn the breaker on, which then allows power to come to the BMS. Turn the display on. I did a discharge test on this already, so we're at 7%, 51.5 volts. Switch through, we can see I've had 3 cycles so far, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, the typical display that you end up seeing. And then our cell information. On the right-hand side of the battery, we do have the Vatrer logo with labels on them, serial number, support information, QR code for app download, some warnings. It also gives you your 5,120 watt hours, 5.12 kilowatt hours model of the battery. And then this is the one that version that has app connection and self-heating. Nothing on the back. Nothing on the left side. And on top, they do have their nice silkscreen cover with the Vatrer logo, app, and then again, self-heating. This is something that Vatrer does very well, their branding. It's not just a plain old looking battery. They actually add some life to it. They make it look good. They incorporate their brand colors, not just in one spot on the battery. So I do really enjoy that they take the time making their batteries look good. Accessory-wise, in the box, we get a little box of goodies. We can see that we've got a pair of silicone wires in here. These are 6 gauge, 200 degrees Celsius. I would prefer to see at least 4 gauge. You're trying to pump 100 amps through. 4 gauge is just better rated for that. This is silicone rated wire, 200 degrees Celsius, but still, we're looking at probably 2 feet in length. It comes with some extra screws, which are probably for the server rack ears. And it's kind of nice that they give you these extra screws on the sides of the battery where the server rack ears go. There are screws in the mount holes already. So if you end up stripping any out, you've got extras right here. So your screws, server rack ears, and then another bag with warranty policy. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the warranty on this battery is. I know it says 5,000 cycles, but I don't see a time frame. So if I can find that, I'll put that on screen for you. But then it also has the manual, which they do a pretty good job with their manual, giving you your information on the specs of the battery, telling you what your voltages are, what the different screens are. A few pages in, they do give you a battery heating flow chart, which kind of gives you an idea of how the heaters work in this battery. When you connect the charger, it detects the temperature of the battery. If the battery is greater than 0 degrees Celsius, it just starts charging. If it's lower than 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts heating the battery but not charging it, and then it starts running through a test. Is the battery above 5 degrees Celsius, about 41 degrees Fahrenheit? If no, it keeps heating until it raises up to normal, and then it finishes charging. This is kind of something nice to see. You don't really see this with some of the other batteries that I've looked at. Is charging and discharge curves. They even include different temperatures of the curve. So this gives you a really good picture of the lithium iron phosphate, how flat of a discharge curve this thing has. And then once you get towards the back, it kind of walks you through their app. So as I mentioned a minute ago, I did go through and perform a discharge test on this. I didn't end up charging up the battery to 100%, and I let it sit that way for at least 24 hours. And you'll see here a picture from when I first got the battery charged to 100%. The cells were not that balanced, but I left it on the charger, let it balance, because this has balance while charging is turned off. So after 24 hours, it ended up balancing the cells really well. And so you can see here on screen the end cell differential and just how well balanced they were after leaving them on that charger for 24 hours. And that's kind of my recommendation for when you get a new battery, because you want to get as much power out of that battery as you possibly can. So give it a good top balance. Let it sit on the charger for 24 hours after you get it. So we did go through, ran a discharge test. We calculated everything through my smart shunt, and then took power from this battery through the Chargeverter, dumped it into my main house battery bank, and we ended up getting 101 amp hours out of this battery. So awesome. I really enjoy when we can actually get more out of these batteries than what they're actually rated for. So let's go through, pop the top, and see how the bill of quality is on this battery. All right, let's see what we've got here. I love when I can see an isolation barrier between the cells and the top cover. Some companies put insulation board on the bottom of the lids. These guys decided to put it over top of the cells. They even have neoprene foam over top of some banding so that even if something does get pressed, it's going to hit this foam first before it hits anything underneath, which is a nice touch. Up front, everything looks nice and tidy. There's actually a lot of extra room in here. All cables have a wire loom or a wire wrap on them. Our negative cable, we have a double 8 gauge coming off of the cells to the BMS. And then looking down underneath, it looks like we have a similar double 8 gauge coming over and combining onto a single lug here on the negative. On our positive, is it going to show up? Yeah, 6 gauge wire. So again, I would like to see 4 gauge. They do have the positive lead going into the circuit breaker, and they have that silicone goop on the inside to keep it from coming out. It's very loose. There are no tight bends, which is nice to see. They have the goop on this side of the circuit breaker as well coming out. There's not a whole lot of pressure on that line here. Down below, in the middle of the screen right now, is the Bluetooth. And they have that glued down to the bottom of the box. And then over here we see our balance leads, but there's also extra sets of wires for the built-in heaters. And here's a temperature sensor right here. I hope it's not the only one. It's pretty loose because it's just taped in here. That tape is going to end up failing at some point, especially if this battery gets warm. Would have been better that they used some of that silicone glue on that sensor. That might be the temperature sensor, because when I look down, I know you're not going to be able to see it, but down here, just to the right of this lug, is where those 2 black leads go in, and the BMS says HT on it, so I'm assuming that's the temperature sensor for the heater. So there's a picture of the BMS label, and then as we start to look at getting into the top part of the battery, we can even see the heaters right here. So we'll have to get an Allen wrench, pop these off so that we can remove this. There we go. Very nice. So again, we can see wire loom for all their different connections. These are not laser welded cells. They are bolted down. Each one has the quality control mark on it. Each BMS balance lead is located on the hump of the bus bar. So they put these little humps into the bus bars for some expansion and contraction. Yes, you're in a fixed box, so I don't know how much of that is actually going to happen. You've got even the fine details of the balance leads being labeled. So this is B16. End positive, we can see here B12, B8, and so on. So looking at this pack, our main negative is over here. And then it goes up along the back, over, and then it serpentines all the way through. And our main positive is over here on this side. Now, while they do have this bar sealed along the top for extra support over top of the cells, I don't know if we're going to be able to see this or not, but if I come over here and look inside, you can see they have vent holes exposed on the inside of this channel. So that way, if for whatever reason a cell had to vent, it doesn't have something blocking the top of the vent. And so across here you can see they've got it on this one as well. That light blue is the vent on the cells. You know, some places try to use zip ties. They actually put in little wire management clips to help keep the wires somewhat managed. So not only do they have the wire loom, they've got the looms are locked into these clips. And it just does make it look nice. I mean, yeah, you've got a lot of wires in here, but they do a really good job of trying to maintain some semblance of order. Looking around the outside edge, they do have epoxy board all the way around the outside perimeter to isolate the cells from the metal case. And then in between each cell, they have, it looks like a neoprene foam between each cell. I don't see epoxy board there, but foam. And in looking, I see one temperature sensor on the front of the pack. And I don't see any other temperature sensors up here. So we have the one on the front, which I'm guessing it's more supposed to be an ambient air temperature sensor. And that, I believe, controls the heaters. We'll find out when we do our test here. And then we have our pack temperature sensor on top of the cells, which I do like to see it on the cells, on the bus bar, you know, someplace not on the frame of the battery, so they can actually get a cell temperature. Let's see if I can get a QR code, because these are supposed to be A-grade cells. So let's see if we can pull up a code and see what they are. They are exposed in multiple places, which is nice to see that they're not being covered up. So I did end up taking a screenshot of one of the cells. I'm saving you from the fact that my cell phone camera is all wonky right now and it just shakes to no end. Makes somebody sick. So QR code, let's see here. EG4 100 amp hour cells, 3.2 volt nominal. Production date September 6, 2024. I believe the 04Q differentiates and says that it's their EVE cells. And now we get to what sets this battery apart from other Vatrer server rack batteries, the built-in heaters. So they have a heater along the front of this row. They have one in between and along here. So they are going to be heating from the outsides in. So every cell in here should heat equally and evenly. So I did want to get a thermal picture of this battery before anything actually took place. So the red that you're seeing is the reflection of the camera on the shiny bus bars. But you know, we're 76, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. You might actually be seeing me in the reflection. Yep, that's me. And so we'll be using a can of compressed air to simulate extreme cold. And we should see it stop charging here as well as over here on the thermal camera. I do want to run this test in the wintertime though, when it's actually cold outside, because hey, I live in Michigan. It gets cold. So we'll turn on our power supply, currently set to 55.36 volts. Turn on our battery, and we are currently putting 5 amps into the battery. We'll turn on the display and we can see we are charging 5 amps. So we'll grab our compressed air. And again, I believe that this temperature sensor on the front is the one that's used for the heaters. This is actually going to be pretty cool seeing this on the thermal too. So we'll do that in 3, 2, 1. Negative 28, negative 22. So it still says we're charging. It's pretty cool. You can see how cold it is right there though. So is that not the sensor for that? Maybe it's for something else. Maybe that's the high temp sensor. Maybe that's what HT stands for. So then let's stop charging so that I can reach my hands in here, turn that off. And we're going to peel up this temperature sensor. There's 2 there. But yeah, they've got both temperature sensors tied together in the same spot. They should have split them apart and put one further back here to detect the temperature. So we'll turn on our charger again now that we've exposed that temperature sensor. Turn our battery on. Turn our display on. And you can see it's still cold down there from our previous attempt. Still everything's charging like normal. So now we will try it on these temperature sensors. Negative 17, negative 18. We can see the temperature falling on this BMS. Okay, we got an alert. Current went down to 0. I still want to keep these a little cool so that we can see if those heaters. So if we can see the heaters kicking in. It's frosty. I'm starting to see some heat coming from right back there. Actually, you can see it between the cells. You see that orange there? That's the heater kicking in between the cells. We still have 4 amps coming off of the charger, but we're at 0 current going into the battery itself. Yep. Where's my finger? Right there. Right underneath those bus bars. See that red? That's the heater kicking in to warm those cells up. The snooze went away on the display. Now you can see we're up to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're now charging at 5 amps again. And our temperature sensor, as you can see, is 52 degrees, 53 and climbing. So now we've got a full 5 amps coming off of the charger going into the battery bank. Yeah, you can see right there that orange there, that's from that plate warming up from that heater. Oh, there it is down there too. Very cool. So yeah, you should get even heat distribution, and with 4.5-ish amps going straight to those heaters, they warm up pretty quickly. So I've had the Vatrer battery app installed on my phone from when I did the golf cart battery review, but on the side of this battery, there's a QR code that you can scan. You can also search for Vatrer in the app stores. We're going to open this thing up. Now that's funny. Their app is actually finding my camera. But it auto-detected the DWD is the Vatrer battery next to me. And if it's ticked to on, then you can come over to this dashboard page and you can see we've got 8% state of charge, same as on the screen, 7.7 amp hours out of 100, Charge and discharge MOSFETs are on. Protection state is normal. We're not balancing yet. With the exception of the charge and discharge MOSFET toggles, it's just a picture into what your battery is doing. What state is it in? So you see your total voltage, current, power coming in, your cell, high voltage and low voltage, and currently my differential is 3 to 4 millivolts. Yes. That's because of that top balance that I did. We've done 3 cycles, average voltage is 3.245 volts. We can see our temperatures. So there are the 3 temperature sensors, which we saw 3. And then our individual cells gives you a breakdown. I think the little dot might flash when it's balancing. And then your about page, English, change your temperature between Fahrenheit and Celsius. But it gives you a good insight into what your battery is doing. So we turned off the connection in the Vatrer app. We're going to launch the Overkill Solar app, which lets us see the individual settings of the BMS. DWD is our Vatrer battery. And I love to see that solid line of cells for the differential. Go to settings. It pulls all the values. 100 amp hour capacity. So balance, the starting balance voltage is 3.3 volts. I usually like to see around 3.45. And then it deltas allows for balancing down to 15 millivolts. Balance when charging is turned off, which we don't want turned on. Our charge over temperature protection, 149 degrees. Charge under temperature, 32 degrees. Cell over voltage, 3.75. It's a little high for my taste. I like to see it right at that 3.65 volts. They have it at 3.75 and releasing at 3.6. Cell under voltage 2.2 and release at 2.5. Again, that's a little low. But yeah, so I was able to actually get that 101 amp hours on the discharge. Oh, and you know what I forgot to show you? One of the most important accessories that comes with this whole battery. They're stickers. You know, I don't think I got any of these with their golf cart battery. I wonder why not. They need to include these in the golf cart battery. I don't know, most people might not care for these. I like them, I think they're a nice touch. I think more companies should include little stickers. So yeah, we've got 2 different sheets of stickers, some larger ones. And I've already had my son coming down staring at these and claiming them because he goes through and takes my extra stickers and plasters them all over his water bottles and different things. So he's already been looking at which ones he's going to take. I have to look and decide which one I'm going to take off of here and add to my test wall. I don't know. What do you think? Which one should I add? Let me know. Because my son's going to be hounding me until I pick one. So overall, tests ran well. Capacity tests ran fine. This isn't one that has inverter communications, so we don't have to worry about messing with any of that. But again, depending on your system, you really don't need it. I mean, you could take these and add them to any system, whether you have communications or not. So what's the use case that I see for this kind of battery? I could see batteries with heaters like this used in an unconditioned barn. You've got a cabin that's in a cold climate that needs to maintain power, but you can't babysit the batteries all the time. These would be able to warm themselves up so that they could maintain their charge from the solar panels. If batteries with heaters built into them were out when I got into solar, back when I had all this stuff out in my barn, I would have looked into something like this instead of trying to jerry-rig my own little heating concept in a chest freezer. I mean, it worked, but you're really limited on space in that freezer. But in my unconditioned barn, I could stack a handful of these out there and they would maintain themselves during the cold winters. I wouldn't have to worry about them charging when the temperature is too low because they would heat themselves. Now, y'all are gonna have to remind me once we get closer to wintertime. I do want to run that test, put this out in the shop or in the barn someplace, put a charge controller on it, and tie some solar panels to it, and see how it does in the dead cold of winter. So I will be coming back to this and trying to do that again when it's not a million degrees outside. Build quality is nice. You know, it's pretty much what I expect from Vatrer. I would have liked to have seen the high temperature sensor closer to the cells. I would have liked to have seen the low temperature sensors that we saw split up and separated so that they're in different spots on the battery, so we're not just looking at one spot on the battery. But I loved the fact that they had the loom set up, that they have that epoxy board on top, as well as those raised bars to help keep any pressure from accidentally denting the top of these batteries. I know that I say that a lot, but this is thin sheet metal. It's easy to get bent, especially from, you know, shipping accident. I would like to see these terminals replaced. Give me those big beefy terminals that I can just add whatever size lug to that I want. And then I would like to see the breaker and the BMS disconnected so that the BMS can be turned on and off separately from the breaker, so that I can still see what the BMS is doing when these terminals are not live. I mentioned this before, but I think they do a good job with their branding. You know, let's not just have a plain Jane black cased battery, white cased battery, whatever. But they add some color to it. They add their logo on it. They make it look nice. These have to sit someplace. You're gonna see them, so why not make them look good? And I think they do a good job of that. It is nice to see that Vatrer is coming out with different batteries for different needs. I mean, we slowly started to see them with the golf cart battery, and then they released the initial server rack battery, and then they had a server rack battery with communications, and then they had a wall mount battery, and now they've got a battery with heaters built into it. So it seems like they're really looking to meet the different needs that folks might have. So I do want to thank Vatrer for sending this out for me to take a look at. Always fun to take a look at some of these batteries, especially with some of these different features added in. This is the first one that I've looked at that has had built-in heaters, so I get to see how they actually worked. I did ask for them to send me their server cabinet, and so I've got that to add this battery to. We'll be throwing that together, bringing you guys along, giving you my thoughts on that. And I'd be very interested to see, with their cabinet, can I put different sized batteries in it? Because some companies build their cabinets just for their batteries. Lots of people buy different style batteries. We'll find out in an upcoming video on that. So with that, I'm gonna let y'all go. Y'all stay safe, stay cool, and we'll catch up with you later.